Every ad we see and every movie we watch has some sort of aspiring man or woman who's different as a child, driven to be something special, but unfortunately his family and his parents want you to be like the rest of us, okay? Until finally some old man comes into his world and like trains him to take on the biggest evil known to man. And the only thing that ultimately beats the antagonist in every single Hollywood movie these days is that uniqueness that he had as a child, just letting it all out and being accepting of the differences. And it turns out the thing that made them unique is a superpower that makes people's mouths taste like coolant. So there's that. I don't really understand how it goes. And I'm Alex, not Martini, with 2 underscores at the end. And the onslaught of us being like taught from like a kid to be special and unique is pretty much everywhere. It's a good thing. You want to be different, you want to be yourself. Totally get it, totally understand it. And the idea of being familiar though isn't really a good thing. At least that's the way sometimes those things are taught to us until you get into middle school and high school and you get bullied if you're a little bit different. But in the car world, in my opinion, basic builds, all right, and being like everyone else every once in a while isn't actually that bad for the community. And here's a few reasons why I think we need to give the new enthusiasts and maybe some of the more basic builds just a little bit more of a break. I know, hear me out. Just hear me out. I see a New Glarus keg right there and I want some so bad. And by the way, our first drop is live featuring the touring bag, which we only made 25 of, all right? They're handmade, they're collaborated with Obsessed Worldwide, and they feature a Porsche Martini racing seat fabric as the primary component. They're very cool, they're very different. And if you want, you can check it out at alexmartini.net. But if not that, then at least subscribe so I know you enjoy the content. And if you don't, because I talk too fast, or because I got an nasally voice, or because I have hair that looks a little bit like a toothbrush, I can't help that. That's just gonna be a thing forever, so sayonara, I love you, not really, goodbye. So what defines a basic build? I mean, you see them pretty much all the time. They're the builds that sometimes, commonly enough, have some of the biggest followings, particularly on new social channels. You'll see a lot of them on TikTok. Sometimes you see a lot of them on Instagram because there's so many car enthusiasts these days, and that's a good thing. But it's the stuff where the moment they brag about their build, you immediately go to the comments to see if anyone removed the filter that you built to refrain from violating community guidelines, because you see them bragging about something and you're like, I don't know if I would have bragged about that, but it's got 600 comments and 42 likes, so you know something's happening in there. And it's happening all over again, especially on TikTok.
When you crank the car, if you hear like coo, bitch, the battery's bad.
And I swear, TikTok is just like the young YouTube in the comment section. It's absolutely insane. And comments be wildin' out there. But even with the common-ish builds, there are a few that stick out more than others in terms of platforms that seem to be ever so popular because of some way, shape, or form. Oh, ow. The BRZ and FRS are one such place where you'd find quite a few basic builds. I mean, over 42,000 Subaru BRZ units were sold in the US alone, which is a pretty impressive number for a low horsepower, 2-door, naturally aspirated car that has been out for an entire decade that really wasn't intended to probably last as long as it did. Now, most car companies these days can't keep a production past like 3 years because everybody's going to EVs now, so they're just killing everything. Now, they had good cost, it was well produced, it was available anywhere you could find a quick trip, okay? Or for those that aren't as blessed with such a beautiful gas station, maybe an OXXO, or an XOXO, or a BP, I don't know. Why would you go anywhere besides Quick Trip? And when people got their hands on the car, you'd see a lot of the same things pop up. Over time, just the wheels, tires, and suspension you'd throw on the car. Then people wanted to get a little bit crazier because everybody was throwing Graham lights on those cars. Everybody was throwing Toyo Extensas. Everybody was throwing BC coils. So then you started seeing people throw on wings. They get different deck lids to give the rear arch more like support, and more LEDs than the interior of a base model 3000 GT in 2012. And that was me. I had underglow everywhere in my 3000 GT. But with that, the BRZ and FRS platform was the stomping ground for quite a lot of people to get their hands into modifications. I mean, it was a high production, newer car with lower horsepower, which meant it was good for the good old insurance. It was also really good for the co-signing of mom or dad so they could get something fun looking and immediately learn the basics without thinking that the kid was jumping into a 400 horsepower muscle car. And the value of having entry-level people jumping into an easily accessible car that has a multitude of vendors is that it allows the market to thrive. The BRZ and FRS community had a functional following, but really this car thrived in the show and street scene where people only had the ability to buy a single car. And this is important because when cars are specifically used as like a one-person driver, like one car, they only have it for college or high school or whatever it may be, they have to dump all their money into one car. Typically, something like a BRZ or FRS is almost perfect, even though it has some of its idiosyncrasies. Now, even if you wanted to go through and excuse that the BRZ FRS isn't the perfect car for somebody like that, it is, okay? You can put on some Suicide Boys music and turn the sub to like max levels. It's awesome. Now, the E chassis, or the E36 and the E46 BMW seem to be the next step after that car. Now, the E36, which was the equivalent of the California Camry in terms of popularity, had every intention of being a daily driven European car, which gave Americans the taste of what it felt like to sit in a car with a dash that wasn't made of the thinnest layer of plastic poured from George H.W. Bush's ass crack. I mean, it was an insane concept for people to experience the E36 and E46 generations. And it worked because the E36 was Car and Driver Magazine's 10 best list car every year it was sold. And the E46 that would follow in 1998 would decimate pretty much all in its competition across every single model list, across every single engine type, across every single badge you could possibly imagine. And fun fact, over 561,000 units were sold worldwide to people like a middle-aged mother who just graduated from dental school, or a single man who had his first single go viral on Z100 in Minneapolis, Minnesota in 2002. Nowadays, they're primarily used by people on the internet that seem to just like having a chip on their shoulder and bomb the living shit out of them for fun. It is what it is. Everybody's got their type, everybody's got their juice and squeeze. I'm not gonna judge. The two generations of the E36 and E46 did, however, introduce the generation to more functional applications of the cars that came with incredible weight distribution, proper handling, and strong power plants when modified with people that have more than half a brain. And this car was insane. It was so accessible. You could find them literally anywhere and everywhere, and they were so beaten down and trodden, you could buy them and find them pretty much for nickels and pennies. The two chassis combined carried people's introduction into autocross. They introduced them into short course driving, HPD, and even event amateur racing because of not only the platform, but the companies that have supported the modifications of BMW worldwide. And that is a huge thing to remember as to why some of these communities are so freaking large. When you can sell them worldwide and they're supported worldwide, that's huge. The international support led to the birth of so many basic builds, but the builds encouraged and crafted the environments and spaces that allowed the car show scene to copy the functional look of what E36s and E46s carried in terms of canards, fenders, cut trunks, deleted headlights, and so much more. These two chassis themselves launched an image and culture of car modification that tens of thousands of European enthusiasts have stood behind for decades now, and it's created a little bit of something some might even argue is a cult, but in a good way. And another one has to be, it has to be, I'm not talking about the Mazda Miata. I'm not even going there, okay? The Honda Civic, all right? Give the brother what it's due. It's a great platform. Third generation plus is my favorite. 1984, you can give me anything. Give me any of them. If they're clean, I'd take it, okay? And if I had $1 for every comment I read on TikTok talking smack about Honda Civics, because that's the standard thing to do when you jump into the car scene, I wouldn't need the 16 cents that I get from the Creator Fund because I would have like $5 a day. Now sure, Honda Civic builds are aplenty, and there's likely hundreds of thousands of builds that encompass one of the most popular cars ever built in the world. The cars have been seen and purchased by every type of human in the world as well, which means you get an onslaught of different types of builds, and sometimes you get a lot of people building the same goddamn car. The environments that these cars have seen in their life is no shortage to the uniqueness that we've all come to see from one of these builds. But at the end of the day, the Honda Civic is a cost-affordable option that not only gets the job done in one of the most reliable ways possible, but can also take on the modification because of its reliability-focused build structure and conservative mindset that came from a company that's been around for almost 85 years. And it was a standard now, but with the introduction of VTEC was a powerful bump for the motor, and the sheer fact that you can get one of these cars like anywhere at any time for such a relatively affordable cost and have Honda's massive community behind it made it a super easy pickup. Like, think of it this way. The iconic era, right, of a Charger and a Camaro was the 70s. And if you said any other era, you probably put your milk in your bowl before cereal. Okay, it was the 70s, all right? The Mustang's era was the 60s, okay? The 70s were Nissan, and the 90s were the EG and EK series of the Civic. Hand down, no cap, whatever term you want to use, it's true. Okay, the Civic empowered a community of people that just being introduced into the modification world, but couldn't afford the overpriced Nissans, the overpriced Mazdas, the overpriced everything that was out there, the unreliable Porsches that were out there, and the disgustingly massive domestic muscles that unless you had a massive ton of money, you didn't really get anything good or anything that was worth it. But you get a Honda, it was pretty sick. And that stayed true even as we get into the new generation of enthusiasts like us. You can pick up a 200 horsepower SI for $27,000 new with a 6-speed manual, and you're set for a car that has a warranty, decent looks, space for the kids that you may have accidentally had, a trunk, and so much more. So why pick the BRZ FRS, E36, E46, and the Honda Civics as examples, all right? Because those are the same generations that get some of the hardest flack for being basic builds, okay? Those are the ones that you see the comments constantly blow up on. But in my eyes, I think that's why we need them so much. Here's the thing, basic builds are sometimes the builds that like the younger version of ourselves, or even you right now, can understand and actually get into, because there's so much accessibility to everything that you would need to do to be a car enthusiast. And to some, those basic builds are some of the hardest things they'll ever do because it's their first time or second time jumping into it. Or maybe their lifestyle doesn't accommodate building something from the ground up. Now, some people aren't at the point to understand how to cut up a car or how to modify a W211 after a water meth install. Some people just want to have a car that looks fun and is lowered, and quite honestly, that's the largest group in the automotive industry. That is the market that you want to sell to if you're a vendor. That's the market that's honestly going to buy the most stuff. Sure, everybody wants the race car Porsche, but Porsche sells more Cayennes and Macans than anything else. And sure, we all want to see the crazy stuff too, but the base enthusiast is kind of what funds those companies who modify the race cars in the same sense. It's the teams who sell the dream of being a race car driver and the industry from getting shut down by the ugly EPA. It's those people that keep this whole thing floating. And quite honestly, that's like the honest truth. The gatekeeping that sometimes seems to occur in this industry is absolutely insane. And a lot of times it's by the person who decided to take like a grinder to their car for the first time. And because of that, they don't want Matt, who's 17, to be proud of his BRZ after buying gram lights for the first time, or maybe throwing some sparkles in it and some LED headlights. And you to the person that's mean to Matt. He's just trying to have a good time. Matt, be careful, don't brag too much, okay? Having relatability in an industry is necessary. It's what keeps the hobby fun versus competitive. And although a lot of people get aggravated by the entry-level builds, you're essentially looking at the next generation of automotive enthusiasts. And if you kind of scare them off, you're probably screwed, because they're either gonna stay here and learn more and more and more and become an even more advanced enthusiast and do a lot of fun stuff and get involved in racing and do all the things that you may be doing now. But if you decide to be a dick, the hobby shrinks. And in all honesty, some basic builds look better than those that look like they accidentally spilt Taco Bell sauce on a dirty Home Depot shirt, but who am I to say? Okay, I'm just here judging what people post on TikTok on my Thursday videos these days. What do you think about the topic? Annoying basic build boys running the community, or are you able to put away the get off my lawn sign and maybe watch them suck at cars for a few years, because at least, hey, your favorite brands are still staying alive? Let me know. And of course, don't forget to subscribe and add your email to the newsletter to get access to our next drop that's coming up, which is looking absolutely wicked. I'm super excited. It's over at alexmartini.net. Don't forget to subscribe, comment, do all that shit. Or don't, whatever. I'm Alex, Alex.Martini with 2 underscores on Instagram, and we will see you later. Adios.